Hello,
To see you. Okay, where are you coming in from?
Oklahoma.
Oh my gosh, I'm in Oklahoma right now.
Are you really? Where? I'm in Tulsa.
I am literally I'm doing a listening tour right now, and I'm driving across the country as we speak in
Oh,
Tennessee. So I'm literally driving across the state today, and I just stopped to take class today.
all right. All right.
Ah, nice to see you. So for our early birds, I always love to take a moment to get to hear your name, where you're calling from, and what called you to class today. What is calling you into the world of sacred storytelling? And I do want you all to know that our live webinar is also on YouTube at the same time. So just so that you know that that's multiple things. We do that because it helps us do our ease of recording, in terms of when you get the replay. So, does anyone want to share what calls you here today? The reason why I love to ask that is because I really love to personalize the classes according to what your interests are. And so as you
Um, I don't know. Am I on mute or can you hear me?
hey,
Okay. Uh, I have my PhD in mythology, so story is really, really important to me, and so it was intriguing to see what you're going to talk about with the master class in it, and so that's why I'm here.
great. A PhD in mythology. What's one of your favorite myths that you feel applies to our times that we're living in right now?
Oh gosh, there's so many, but Kali and somewhat Anana
Mm,
going into the descent and trying to come up rebirthed, hopefully, like she does. Um, kind of destruction with Kali, but after that, there's rebirth. So both of those myth kind of
yeah,
stories resonate right now.
yeah, great, great, great. Anyone else like to share your
I would be
name?
happy to.
Hi.
Hi, I actually joined, I guess it'll be the same class a few days ago, and I got the notification today and thought, well, it could be different. But being both live, there'll be enough different for me to get a sense of what I'm looking for, which is um, I'm a Wiccan priestess, and I think storytelling is a phenomenal teaching tool. And I'm looking to develop ways that I can improve my techniques and my presentations to really be able to transfer the understanding and the spiritual sense of connection I feel with them, with my audience, to be able to expand that. So it was wonderful that you focused on the sacred story last time. More of that suits me wonderfully, or any other approach. And thank you. I appreciate you the way you present very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. This is a very similar class. It's like the same structure, but what I'll say is that who's in the room, informs what comes alive. And what I will do is I'll make a point of talking a little bit more about how to work with your audience. And what I'll do specifically today is do a little bit more talking about the transference of in terms of what you were speaking with, in terms of creating a space where people can explore what is going on in their inner world and their inner consciousness. So we'll play with that. I see some familiar faces. Hello, Maxine. Good to see you again. All right. Anyone else just want to pop in and say hello, your name, and if there's something specific that you are seeking? And I always do love getting to hear your names and what calls you here, because what it will do is I will personalize our class according to who's in the room. Makes it more fun. Nice to see your smiles. And I always recommend like really giving yourself the gift of this hour. I can be one of those people that will try to multitask and I'll do the dishes while listening to a webinar. And what I'll say is that what we're doing today, there is an opportunity for me to, I will be asking real questions of you, really asking you to take some things into consideration. And when I ask those questions, I'm really asking for your voice as well. And so please know that your voices are welcome, that if questions arise, that please feel free to ask them as I go. There might be some part that I speak to where part of the genius that lives inside of you in that comes alive and you want to share that with us. And that is also welcome. We are all storytellers. I've definitely been spending a lot of time and energy and attention to how do I speak to and create a structure around introducing people to the world of sacred storytelling. And that's what we're going to do for the next hour. Shannon's saying she's in her car and unfortunately, an appointment ran long, but I'm here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And oh man, I'm sorry, Marie-Ange, that your mic isn't working. That is frustrating, but we can at least get to text. I will read those comments along, and it is more fun to get to hear your voice. So there's one thing that I want to do in terms of hearing your voice. So let's do this together. This is one of the things. In terms of how do we come present, we're going to do a couple of different things. The first thing I'm going to invite you to do is to tone. This is a strange, wild time in the world right now. How do we speak to how we're feeling? And oh my God, like all of a sudden, perhaps your ego got activated, and you're like, "What story am I in? What am I going to say?" And so, in this moment, I'm just going to invite you to take a deep breath. You might even want to close your eyes. Nobody's going to be looking at you. You can take yourself off mic. I actually invite you to take yourself off mute right now. Sorry, take yourself off mute for a moment. And I'm going to invite you just to tune into yourself, take in a nice deep breath, and just allow the sound that wants to come out of you right now. Just how are you feeling in this moment without thinking about it? What's the sound that wants to come out? And so just take a nice deep breath and allow that sound to come out. So it might be like, hi. Right now. And if there's anything that wants to be let go of, let's do that. There's so much grief and fear and stress, and let's just like, oh, let's just like let that one go too. And now let's come to ourselves and consider what is what is that thing we most want to bring into this world consciously. Today we're going to be talking about what does it mean to be a conscious creator. So in this moment, I'm going to invite you to consider what is the sensation? Is it peace? Is it joy? Is it ease? Is it rest? Is it a place to grieve? And just think about what does that sound like coming out of you right now? You're not thinking, you're just this intention. If I want to be in peace right now, what am I going to sing if it sounds like peace? And I'm inviting you. What is that you're calling? What is that you're letting flow through you? I love. So thank you. So maybe not exactly how you expected to start a storytelling class, but first we begin with what stories are we coming from? There is this beautiful quote that I like to begin every single class with, and I want to bring this quote to you as well. And it's by Rebecca Solnit, and it goes like this. We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us. They tell us to love or hate, to see or be seen, And often, too often, stories saddle us and they ride us and they rip us onward, whip us onward. And they tell us what to do, and we do it without questioning. The task of learning to be free requires learning to hear them, to question them, to pause and hear silence, to name them, and then become a storyteller. And so this is how we are entering our day today. And that quote is by Rebecca Solnit. We're entering our day by saying, oh, where are we coming from? What stories are we carrying unconsciously? And can we spot those before we start bringing ourselves to the threshold of becoming a storyteller? And then what does it mean to become a sacred storyteller? And what does it mean to become a conscious creator in our times? And so this is what we're going to be playing with today. And so I want to invite you to consider for 1 second, what story are you living in right now? What story are you living in right now? And this is a real question that I'm asking. You might be living in the story of, I am in a deep, soul satiating, loving relationship, and I know what love feels like. Or you might be in the story of, the world is falling apart and we're headed towards the end times. Or you might be in the story of, oh my God, we're in the story of new beginnings and new forms of communities coming together. I'm going to ask you to be really positive. Excuse me. Wow, that was not what I was going to ask you. I was going to tell you that I have noticed that in these rooms, people tend to be excessively positive. And I love that because we need that kind of inspiration. But one of the things that we do as storytellers, as we, especially sacred storytellers, is we make space for the wholeness of the story. Etymology of wholeness, holiness, right? We make space for the entire story to exist together. So I'm going to invite you into what is the name of the story or stories that you are living in right now. And we have an author among us, Danielle Baker, and she says that my story is one of rediscovering myself. And as scary as that is, I'm excited at the same time. Right. How can we hold the more we push our comfort zones, the bigger our territory to live. And so thank you for speaking that. Who else wants to write or speak? What story are you living in right now and the times that we are in? There's no right or wrong answer. We're just beginning to kind of come to the walk around. What is this thing called story and how does it live in my life and how am I playing a role in it? Kay says, I am in the liminal story, the in between then and now. I so appreciate that. It sounds like, Kay, you have a relationship with a mystery. You know, so many stories in the Western world make no space for the mystery. We like our beginnings, middle, and end, and we like our stories to be tied up in a bow, and we like everything explained. And that creates a certain kind of mind structure in terms of what we have capacity for. I just started reading these Laguna stories, and they're from the Laguna Pueblo of New Mexico. They're very disturbing because some of them make no sense. They have so much space for the unexplainable and for the mystery. And I started to see like my nervous system was all shaken up because I'm used to a story structure that I understand that when I enter it, I'm going to come out. I know exactly where the exit's going to be because we're so predictable in that way. I really recommend that you read a lot of different kinds of stories from different cultures so that you can become, again, this bigger territory to play in. Karen is in a story of grief and joy and letting go. Look how they can both be in the same place. Grief and joy. Yeah. So,
I
I'm,
had a
yes.
I had a thought. This is Moonbeam Mage. I I feel my story that is around me now is one of potential.
Mm,
In potential, we feel often a time of refrain because of uncertainty, but it's a time of expansion
mm,
because of that potential, even though we may feel we've had to pull apart from each other in many ways in these times. But at the same time, I think that really that expansion is working on us and we are reaching out. And so I see that
I ask
potential.
one thing, Moonbeam, can I ask you one thing? As you speak your story, can you use the word I rather than we?
Oh, yes, yes. I see this as a time of potential, and within that potential, that expansion I speak of. I feel there is struggle. I feel struggle. Um, but there's a true sense of plausible success because as long as we're expanding, that's also implying growth. And that's precisely, I believe, what's needed. I feel I've withdrawn, the world's withdrawn. I see too much focus on me. I like to think we're coming into a time of we think and
Mm,
us think.
beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And so, just for a moment, because we are students of story today. What happened for you when you started to hear? I heard a story of possibility, of opportunity. I felt the resonance of someone that really believes that's lived a lot of life. And even though they've lived a lot of life, they're seeing what's going on in the world. They're seeing change and transition, and yet they're holding a space for a positive, trans, a different kind of transition. So I'm asking yourself to really be studying, and I asked her to use the word I rather than we, because when we use the language we, and I'll bring a teaching that I'm carrying forward from my teacher, one of my teachers, Stephen Jenkinson, and was he on me about using the language of we, and he said there is, and he speaks about this and that. Look at around our room. If you put ourselves in our gallery view, you can look around the room. We are from all around this country. Oftentimes, I know people come in from Ireland and Australia and England. So when we use this language of we, we're all of a sudden assume that it's like we do not have a shared culture among us. So I've learned, especially when we start talking story, the danger of using we is that all of a sudden the people who are listening to you might kind of hit a point where they're like, "You're not talking about me," and then they can't always listen. So there's so much power, even though I really value what you're saying that we're moving out of the I into the we, but there's so much power, and when you're speaking your vision, to speak it from yourself, because then people can come close and they can listen in a different way. So you have me going wildly off of my webinar, my pretty PowerPoint already. So you got to make it interesting when people can come continuously and give them a little something different each time. A little bit about me. Hello, Kelly from Spokane. And Marielle is just living in a story of stepping into my power, and all the initiation entails letting go and rebirthing. I love that. And you just spoke to this key term that I feel like is the liberation of as a storyteller. And what that is context. Are bad things and horrible things happening to us? We're all going to go through challenges in time, whether it's with an illness or loss of a family member or job or home, right? There's going to be the things that make and create the character of who we are. And if we see those things as initiations, and a lot of us don't live in cultures that give us initiations, then all of a sudden the role that we play and how we tell the story and what we have to give to others because of it is affected. So I love your expression of saying, "Oh, I'm in an initiation." Because now when you're in initiation, the whole world is organizing to support you, right? That person who's the biggest jerk in the world and is a pain in your butt and is creating so much discomfort in your life, oh, they're your master teacher. Ah, thank you so much, master teacher, for giving me an opportunity to learn something that no one else was willing to bring to me this lesson. Thank you. And all of a sudden you get to play with life in a different way. Okay, so you came here for sacred storytelling, and I'm going off on initiation. And oh my gosh, they're so connected. So let me talk to you a little bit how. So a little bit of background about me and where I come from is that I grew up in a farm in Vermont, and my listening began on that land. And I say that because I really believe that storytelling begins with being a good listener. And at that time, I really, my gifts for storytelling, for writing, for theater began to emerge, and I was very lucky. My family saw those talents, and they, they really fostered those gifts at a very young age. And I was part of a professional theater group growing up. My first play was produced before I was 18 by a professional theater company. And I really learned the responsibility of storytelling at that time, because that first play was about a friend of mine who had committed suicide. And I had gone to that thing which had brought me so much joy and pleasure, which was writing and theater, that in that place I had played with my dear friend Sheila. And I went to that place to manage my grief when she had died in a very unexplainable way to me. And I learned the responsibility of what we put out comes back. When that play was produced, all of a sudden I thought I was just working with my grief, and all of a sudden I realized that I was now responsible to stand before those other people who also held grief that was amplified through that story that I had told. I went on to study theater in New York City with Sandy Meisner and went and worked at off Broadway, and I got to feel that magic that happens in the room that's so palpable. You know, this thing, this unexplainable thing. And I really wanted to understand how to harness that energy and use it for social good. I ended up working as a wilderness guide for many years. And at that time, I really understood group process. And I began to understand this again, this magic of listening. And I became part of an old culture of storytelling where people just listen. Where when you speak, you know that you'd better have something to offer or say. I then ended up getting a master's degree in social work and became aware of systems thinking and how to work the clinical part of all of this work. And I ended up going and working with Al Gore at his television network and hosted and produced the Green Channel. And really, it was this marriage of my love of the environment, my love of story, my love of social justice and environmental justice, and how can we weave them all together. And while I was there, I was working under this idea that if we gave people the information to move them to inspiration, to motivation, to activation, we could really mobilize our world right now. And all the data showed me that I was asking the wrong question. People don't respond to data; they respond to story. And it sort of liberated me to come to the truth of where my gifts really lied, and that's with story. I'm not going to go into the rest of it, but I ended up really working with story and ceremony and story and healing, both in the collective and the individual. But that's a little bit of the history of what brings me to you. And I've been teaching sacred storytelling. Both in person, creating live ceremony events for groups and online. So, I want to bring you to some of the oldest knowledge that lives on this planet, and it comes from a lot of the ancient cultures. The Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful that they can raise enough energy to slow the world or to set it into motion. And I really encourage you to go study hula. Go online, go to YouTube, watch hula, and get to see this culture that is still absolutely alive and connected to its original roots. To get to see, um, a group that understands the power of their language and the power of their prayer. It's an embodied prayer. That's what hula is. Sicilians believe that words can poke holes in the universe. So think about the last time you got into an argument and said something that can't be taken back. The Australians believe that the stories of the past must be sung to the present in order for the future to exist. The Maoris say that words don't describe a thing, they are the thing. And all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I want to say that again because this is very, very potent, and especially if as we look at a time when humans are like, what's our role here? Some of the oldest understandings that we have from all the cultures speak to this really unique role that humans have, which is that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. Abracadabra is one of the most ancient words we have on the planet. It comes from the Aramaic mysticism. It means I create as I speak. I'm going to give you this beautiful quote, which I just love. Wherever I go, there I speak. I can't go anywhere, nor can you, without speaking your way there. That's how you arrive. It's like a wake on a boat. It arrives to the shore before you do. So language is an exquisite tool in which we are made. That quote is by Stephen Jenkinson. So I speak this piece about, wow, understanding the power of our language, the power of our words, our power of who we are and our unique role as creators. So I want to ask, we've been dancing around this already. We dove right in, but let's dive in a little bit more specifically now, and let's get to what is a story. Shannon, should we start repeating things now together? People who study with Cindy Meisner will understand that joke. Okay, what is a story? There's no right or wrong answer. I see you speaking, Jocelyn, but you are muted.
Is that better?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Nice. I'm enchanted already um, with your words. I've been writing a long time, and I was writing experiences that I went through. And the last year, I changed everything and decided to, because I've been writing a long time, decided to write about, to edit all the experience out of my life and write who went through these things how. In other words, it's very hard because I realized that a lot of time my soul was not part of the experience because of different pressures, different environment, different. Um, well, this is life apparently. So it's a very hard process that I feel I'm going through. And you say, what is the story? Your first question, I would have, the first time you asked, I would have said, my stories is a story of editing. All the human, um, the emotion and all of these that you transcend eventually, that makes you become bigger, better human being. And so now, with looking at all of this edited, God, you feel like it's a lot. It's hard. It's really hard.
Thank you for just speaking so openly and vulnerably
Yeah,
about this.
well,
Yeah.
it's hard in it, and the words don't come from the same place when you get there. So it's. I don't really know. I'm trying to make a discipline of doing this every day, and I have the right place, and I'm in the forest, and I'm in the whole setup to do it, and this loneliness about the environment and what we are living through, being confined and all of these things. uh, it's like supporting all of that, but in the same time, so that's the story I'm editing myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to invite us just a little bit wider, and Jocelyn brought us back to that question, like, right, what story are you in right now? And you spoke a little bit about that story of isolation that's so alive, and I want to ask again, what is a story? We started to wonder what's our story, but let's kind of take a step back now. What is a story itself? And you might not have like the exact answer, and this is an opportunity to practice eloquence, where you just ground yourself to the earth and you open to the inspiration and you allow a few words to come out. And Kelly Marie Dawson is saying a story to me is your experience or journey that you share with others to give insight into who you are. Okay, so she just said a million things all at once, right? So there's a journey, right? There's an arc. We know that we're going to start here and we're going to end somewhere else. And then here now she's talking about a story that gives insight. Okay, what she's actually saying that there's in Kelly's expression of a story is that there's also some intention, that it does something, to you. It gives you something. And so now I would even go so far as now she's beginning to touch on the tinges of a sacred story. Well, let's keep going on with what is a story. What is it? These are all just ways to play, some things to start to consider. and Moonbeam saying a story that it manifests in participation in the continuum of human wisdom. Okay, right, gosh. So it's like this, there's a participation that she's speaking about, that there's story and then there's the human wisdom, and she's talking about there's a connection between the two of them, but it's not inherent. So I like this. Again, she's beginning to hint to where I'd go to what a sacred story is. Karen saying it's a translation of life into words. Karen, I'm going to stop right there because that's such a beautiful thing, and I want to pause and ask, and I know that we've got a ringer in the room who could answer this, but let's talk about for a moment just what is a myth? Does anyone want to speak to what is a myth? I know I'm eddying out for just a moment, but it's because Karen's taking us there. Okay, I mean, can I call on you? Do you want to speak to what a myth is, or shall I just give my definition? Give my definition. Oh wait, you're muted, so I can't hear you.
You go with yours.
Okay. Um, so a very simple way of explaining what a myth is a myth is it's a story that has no author. Okay, so in many ways, we can be mythopoetic with this. These are free stories. These are stories that have not been enslaved by the language that have to be told in just one way. Now, if we go even further back and we say, well, wait, if it's a story that has no author, where does myth emerge from? And there's a Sean Kane, who's a beautiful, beautiful writer, Wisdom of the Myth Tellers, if you really want to entrench yourself in myth and go beyond Joseph Campbell. It speaks to that myths are the earth speaking out loud. So now we come back to this idea of, oh, Shannon's saying, we're talking about this idea of, um, you know, where Karen was saying it's a translation of life into words, and now it's like we come back to this idea of who are we as listeners? What are we listening to? What are we creating? And are we listening to the earth, and are we creating the stories of this time from that place, or are we listening to something else? And I don't have an answer for this. All I have is an active state of wonder to sit with you in, and to ask, what are the stories that you're carrying? What are the stories that are coming alive in you right now? What are the kinds of stories that come alive in you when you go and sit in the forest, or next to a lake, or next to the creek, or next to a hydrant, or on the pavement? Those things are expressions of the earth too. So let's not pretend that it's not all interconnected. Um, so right, so this idea of that myths, now we're understanding that humans have this very unique role where we are speaking the earth out loud by carrying her myths, by giving them a voice that can be carried beyond, from one person to another through time and space. Now I come back to this idea of what a story is. And a story is what we live. It's an archetypal story that is a primordial, I'm going to guess is that word. Myth is a story told to explain a phenomenon, yes. And Mary saying a story is a tale of transformation with beginning, middle, and end, but not necessarily in that order. I love that. And so, who is the archetype of the storyteller? But it is the spider, right? The spider is that archetypal energy that can go beyond dimensions, that connect the dots. And what do we understand about storytellers that are very unique? We are the memory keepers. We're also the context creators. So we keep the memory, we keep the context. This is why news is a very strange thing, right? Because it's just beaming the latest information of the moment. Very rarely does it give us context in a way to be in relationship to our past. So humans, this is a fun fact, humans cannot actually metabolize data and information. Okay, so if you're ever into a room and people throw out a bunch of facts and information, and you're one of those people that's a little bit sensitive to energy, all of a sudden you'll feel all the energy go, whoo, it kind of sinks. People kind of can't quite, we just can't do it. People metabolize information through story. What does story do? But it gives us a role to play. So think about that as you start considering the stories that you tell about the world that we're in right now, and even the stories about our future. And you can tell these stories through literal narrative, or you can do it through the mythic expression. And we are, what lives in myths but metaphor? What is metaphor but language of the spirit? So you're beginning to understand the multidimensionality of story. And so a very unpoetic expression of what a story is a story using historically, humans refer to themselves in reference to the latest technology. So I'm going to go off of that, and I'm going to say, okay, now story is an operating system. We're using the language of technology. Story is an operating system. And in that operating system, we learn our beliefs, our values, and what we believe is possible. So a story is a lot of things, and this is one way that I'm trying to be very simplified in how do we understand and how do we examine this, what it is. Now, if we look at a story as an operating system, okay, what were the stories that you were raised with? What were the fairy tales? What was the television programming? I love it. It's all in our language. One of the things I love about storytelling is that it's created of words. What are words? But they're the codes of understanding. If you want to understand the world you're living in, understand, become a student of etymology and start to study that. You know, one of my favorite words, so many of our words have been hijacked. We don't even know what they mean. You know, apocalypse. Apocalypse has been hijacked to mean the end of the world. That's not what it means. Apocalypse, when you go back to the Greek etymology, it means it's a lifting of the veils. It's a seeing what's really there. Oh, sure, it's the end of the world as we knew it, or as I knew it, you know, but it's oh, I can see now everything that's really going on. It's like you know we're in Oz and the curtain has been pulled back. It's not like the sexism, racism, you know, hate. It's not like that hasn't all been here. A lot of that's been here, but now we have the tools and the consciousness to not only perhaps see it but also consciously relate to it. And so when we understand that we've been in a story, that those stories have defined the roles that we play, now we're cooking with fire. Okay, so fire, the places where we used to gather around the story. Okay, so what's a sacred story? I'm entertaining myself now. I hope I'm entertaining you too. What is a sacred story? No right or wrong answer. Some of us have been hinting on it. Sacred story. Okay, I see Kelly Marie is in there typing. Can you repeat the definition of a storyteller? Okay, so the definition, I'm not going to call it a definition of a storyteller, you know, but what I would say is a storyteller, one of our roles is that we're record keepers, we're the memory keepers. So, you know, one version in the indigenous times, the storyteller would go from village to village and they would carry the stories from one to another. They would be able to say, hey, this happened and that didn't work so well and this happened and this worked well, and they would carry that information, you know, but they carried it through story. So they were again the history keepers, they were the record keepers, they were the ones who held the memory. There are some cultures still to this day where they have to tell the stories in specific seasons, and that story must be told in the exact right words in the exact right order, and if they get one word out of place they have to stop and start again. You know, so there are some cultures that understand that's how powerful stories are. Um,
Yeah, but you
and
said you had two parts of the sentence. One was a record keeper or a memory keeper,
oh, context,
and
and we create context,
context.
right?
That's what I wanted. Yeah.
Context and meaning. So we're connecting the dots. But here's what I want to say, and I want to give a nice, good warning when we say we're creating context and meaning. You know, because some of us who love to play in myth we'll start listening for the myths of our time. Joseph Campbell said that new myths would emerge in our time, and every time has their myths. And so as we start to listen for those, and you can say, oh my God, COVID's all over the world. I'm like, it's climate change. Oh my God, it's the end, blah, blah, blah. Or you can say, oh, Earth is but a young maiden, and we are holding her dream of becoming the Great Mother. But first, she must go through a great initiation. And perhaps in that initiation, she's going to learn a thing or two about overgiving and giving too much. Perhaps she's going to learn a thing or two about creating good, strong, healthy boundaries. Perhaps she's going to learn a thing or two about who she's going to partner up with, you know. So, um, again, what I want to always invite you to do is as we create stories, can we say that we have a story, not the story? You know, if there's any great myth I would make about this time is that we are living in the time of many stories happening at once. This is very challenging. No other culture has been asked to do this in the way that we've been asked to do this before. Most cultures, they have a shared story. And there's a place of belonging and connection in those stories. This is really different. There are so many stories happening. Each town has, you know, hundreds of stories, hundreds of different versions of perspectives. how do we live in this time, and how do we understand this is a very strange and different time? And here I'm going to tell you a little prophecy story, and then I'm going to come back to understanding what is a sacred story. When there's a prophecy story, and I believe this is the white buffalo woman, and I'm going to take you to the very end of it, just to kind of make this point that we were just playing with. And at the very end of the story, it speaks to that there will be a time on the planet when people of all colors and all nations can dance together. And when that time comes, then peace will live on earth. That's beautiful. They just didn't tell us what it would take for people of all colors to dance and sing together. You know, so again, when you look at these, it's like when you look at the prophecy stories, they can be very dangerous stories to look at and to understand, because first of all, any story that has been removed from the land that it lives on, if you don't understand the land and the language of the land, you are immediately disabled in understanding that story. And then if you understand that some of these stories have been, you know, I'm literally on a listening tour right now, collecting indigenous stories as we speak, and collecting the prophecy stories, some stories that were designed to be carried through this time and designed to serve us and guide us through these times. And some of these stories, you know, I'm working with these cultures and they say, we can't even tell them to you because what happened to a story when the people who held that story were colonized or abused or forced, you know, underground and forced into secrecy to continue carrying this. It's not the same story. So some of those people don't even want to touch those old stories anymore. So I say this a little bit just because specifically, you know, if you're someone who's fascinated by prophecy stories and think that they will guide us through this time, any prophecy story must be examined in a 360-degree view. And I worked with one elder who was like, you got to flip it over and look inside out. You got to look at it from all angles. You can't take it literally at all. And so that's one of the things that I would offer as we start talking about myth and old stories. I don't usually talk about old stories. Moonbeam knows this, but I guess she's here and calling out this deeper conversation today. Is that um, is that they take time to understand because they're asking us to do something that we don't get a lot of opportunity to do. A lot of our life right now is spent in a very linear form. When we go to these old stories that speak through metaphor, it's a non-linear approach. And so you can't go in there with your ego to try to figure it out. It's something that comes through much more of a transmission, of a connection, of something else that comes through the story that can't always be easily understood or explained. Okay, so a sacred story, I'm just going to kind of cut to it now, is that a sacred story, what I understand a sacred story to be, is that it has a life force inside of it. It has the divine living inside of it. And so we're using that language sacred. Now, of course, as soon as I say something is sacred, it's a setup for failure. Because as soon as I say that something is sacred, then I'm inherently, by using the language, by employing that language, I'm saying that something else is not sacred. What a mess I just got myself into. But here we are. And this is, we're living in our times, and what does sacred say? But it brings us to this understanding and this remembrance of seeing and honoring the life that lives in all things. And so that is not something, that is not an expression, a way of being that a lot of us grew up in. I will just speak for myself. I didn't grow up in a culture that that held that up. You know, so we have to call on that language so that we have a way of speaking to and calling back this way of seeing and respecting and honoring the life in all things. So as we say that, we're like, oh, okay, so now this is a story that holds that kind of reverence for life. Okay, so now this is a story that is here in service of life thriving. Okay, now we're beginning to get a sense of what is a sacred story. You know, and so a lot of times you'll feel it. You know, you can tell a story about the Holocaust, you can tell a story about COVID, you can tell a story about murder, and it can be a sacred story if it's holding the keys. You know, if it's holding a life force in it that's here to serve your life, if it's holding the wisdom pieces. You know, if it's holding, you can tell a story about war that holds the resonance of peace, where it's calling peace into being. So we might learn about those past mistakes. So a lot of times we'll ask people when they become sacred storytellers, what are you in service to? And I asked you that at the very beginning of this class. What are you in service to? What do you want to bring here? And I invited you to do it through the resonance of your song, of your voice, without getting your ego all messed up and what the words are supposed to be. And if there's any liberation from your ego, I think it's getting to stand at the doorway of being a sacred storyteller, because it is a collaborative relationship with that creative life force. And some might call it the muse, and some might call it the ancestors, some might call it the earth speaking out loud. Some might call it spirit. It goes by many names. It's whatever you relate to, how you relate to that creative life force. But as you stand at that doorway of becoming a sacred storyteller, this is what I'll always ask you: what are you in service to? And the clearer you are, you can't help but hold that inside of your body. It can't help but be amplified through the resonance and through the stories that you tell. So if you're committed to bringing peace to our planet, even in these strange times, you know, how will you tell stories that allow peace to live inside of them? Moonbeam just did that for us a little bit earlier. I felt the sense of peace and ease, just through her vision of what's possible. Not to say that she might not have some fear about the unknown, but what does she choose to speak? And so a lot of that, again, we come down to, some of the oldest understanding of the technology of prayer. You don't pray for the things that you don't want. I'll never forget the time that I was flying I was flying and I looked down and there was this big mountain and it said no war. And I could just see it. There was this like this massive, they were calling for war. I was like, what if they had just said yes, peace, and then they'd put peace on the earth. And so again, as we become more and more, as this apocalypse that comes and the veils lift, and we become more and more conscious of how powerful we are as creators with our language, I'm going to continuously ask you, what are the stories that you are going to carry? What are the stories that you're going to give your life force to? So, what's the opposite of a sacred story? Is a zombie story. And what's a zombie story? But it's that story where you don't feel so good after you hear it. You feel a little, maybe a little dead in yourself. Maybe you don't really believe that people should be on the planet. And so really start thinking about what the television shows that you watch, the movies that you watch. I'm not saying don't look at the things that scare you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm asking you to put on your super spidey, I see stories glasses and say, is that a story that I want to carry? Is that a sacred story? Is that a zombie story? You can watch the whole show and then you can start to cherry pick which ones you're going to carry and amplify through the power of your life force, the power of your voice. So, want to create a story? Shall we right now? Is it time? I see a smile or two. Let's do this. Okay. So, yes, it's Shannon. Let's talk about a wisdom story. So, a wisdom story is I'm going to give you a story recipe. And a story recipe is this story that, you are on the other side of something. Okay. So, I'm sorry, a story recipe, it's just that. I'm going to give you a couple of guidelines, a couple of guideposts to make your way through the journey of a story. And as with any good recipe, you might want to throw in some other ingredients, and your muse might start to inspire you. And by all means, I invite the muse at all times. So if that happens, please allow her to interrupt. Okay, so this is the structure for a wisdom story. And wisdom story, it's like you're on the other, it's something that really sucks. So pick a moment in your life that really sucked. You really, gosh darn, you're so glad you don't have to do that one again. And the only key ingredient for you to be able to call on this particular moment as a wisdom story is that you can't have to be right. Okay, so if you are so clear and if righteousness is alive in you and someone was so wrong, that's not a wisdom story. Okay, but if you can go back to that moment and allow your ego to have the day off and to engage a humble approach, that you are asking for this great collaboration with that divine creative life force to bring you into relationship to this as a sacred story, and that you can approach this as your own initiation. Now we're beginning to wander onto the path of this. So you've got your moment, and wow, boy, here you can't wait to change that one. And this is what I think of. I think of stories that are like trees. They should change over time because you change over time. So your story can be rooted in the truth of what it is, but it will grow, it will change, it will transform, because you will grow, change, and transform as you metabolize what has happened in that story, and as you begin to change roles and you have different forms of perspective. Okay, so now we go back to, okay, where does the story really begin? We remember how the archetype is the storyteller is a spider, so it's not a linear process. When I tell the story of when I got diagnosed with cancer, it did not begin on the day that I walked into that hospital room and sat at that sterile desk with a guy with a white, coat, and he stared at me and he gave me this information. That's not when my story began. My story began when I was 4 years old. My mother is a painter. We got all kinds of things from her artist friends. And I had this big, beautiful tapestry that had been hand embroidered, and it was of this woman that was giving flowers to the children in the neighborhood. And on that tapestry, it said, Leah. She embroidered my name, Leah. Give what you have to someone else. It may mean more than you dare to think. And I remember being a very young child and not having a clue what that meant. What does that mean? Give what you have to someone else. It may mean more than you dare to think. And I didn't understand what that meant until I was 29 years old, sitting across this desk from a doctor who had just said that he was going to cut across my throat, and there was a very good chance I was going to lose my voice. And for the first time, I knew what I had. Okay. So that's an example. This is a nonlinear process. So when you go back to that moment of where does your story really begin, don't try to figure it out. This is not an ego job, right? You're doing a collaboration with that great creative life force spirit. So let yourself, let the energy come out here, search outside of yourself, go for a walk in the woods, take a bath, just consider, just have a good question and a good answer can emerge. Okay, so now you've got that and you're like, okay, now you're going for that universal theme. What is your story really about? John Steinbeck says if your story is not about your readers, then it will not last. So now we're going to come back to what is that universal theme that makes your story about the whole human collective. So when I tell my story, it's not about me getting thyroid cancer. It's about my initiation. See, something that you don't know about me is that growing up, I had mastered the role of becoming a victim. And I earned that role rather fairly. But I also had gotten so used to playing it that I knew all the lines and I could out victim story anybody in any room. And then all of a sudden, here I was sitting across from a doctor who was like coming at me with this like purple velvet pillow with a queen of victimhood placed on it, telling me that I was about to lose my voice. And all of a sudden, everything in me woke up and screamed, no, not this time, not now. And it was as if there was this escape hatch that just showed up in the room, and I jumped out of it. And I did not know what was going to be on the other side. But I was not going to say those same lines over and over and over again. And what I found on the other side was this woman who played with humor. And I started cracking jokes. As soon as he told me I was going to lose my voice, I said, oh, you just say that to all the pretty girls, don't you? I don't know where this humor came from, but I all of a sudden had a job. I had a task, and that task was to make everyone smile or laugh every time I had to go have my blood taken or go for some kind of doctor transaction. All the things that scared me the most, all the things where I just wanted to kind of fall apart in terror. And I just had this job, and my job was to laugh, and it got me through. Okay, so what are we doing? It's in reflection. It's not like I knew any of that at the time. I was just being it, right? But as storytellers, we get to go back. We get to make sense. We get to bring context, make meaning. And what are we doing? But we're throwing breadcrumbs over our shoulders to those behind us who are going to have some rough situation, and then somehow they're going to call on your story, not because they're going to be in the exact same situation, but because something in you is going to spark something in them in just the right moment. So all stories, here's your third recipe part. All stories have like a magi. You got a Yoda. You've got a fairy godmother. You have someone outside of yourself that helps you discover your gifts, discover the truth of who you are. This is a very important role. So it's a role of someone that's outside your family system. And again, I always invite you to not think that you know the answer before you've asked your sacred story, the life of your story, to come alive through you. Because what I found was a garden. Something that you might know about, having your thyroid removed is that they actually don't know how much medicine to give you. And so they just kind of give you anything and then they just wait to see how your body responds. In my case, they gave me speed. And I was just came out with all jittery and I had all this energy and I called my friends up and I said, "Come on over, let's make a big garden." And they're like, "Leah, you're crazy. You just got out of the hospital." And I was like, "I know, let's make a big garden with all this energy that I have." And so we created this big 70-foot circular garden. And thank God we did, because about a week later, all that speed began to exhaust my body and I fell into this deep, 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 deep depression. And all that I had was that garden, because a lot of the people around me didn't know how to be with their own fear around what was happening. And every morning I would walk the spiral of that garden and I would walk my gratitude. And I did not know gratitude before this situation. It was not a popular theme. Oprah wasn't talking about it. I really believe that garden taught me the practice of gratitude. And every morning I would walk out of that garden with my prayers. And I did not pray before this time. I did not know what prayer was. But in that time, every morning I prayed for my life. And I do believe that those prayers are what brought me to you today. So again, what was the thing that got you through? What was that transformation point? What was the thing that helped you? Um, So now it comes time for your ending. And endings are something that take great skill and great craft and technique, and it's a whole thing to create a great ending. And so if you want to be brilliant with it, maybe you can connect your beginning to your ending. Or if you don't have the time and you're going to end this class in just a few minutes and you're going to go write a story map, and you can do this. You can write your story in 15 minutes. Okay, I created that story that I just told you in 15 minutes for a storytelling competition. Okay, so you can too. You don't have to think too hard about it. Just allow yourself to be inspired. You know the story and you're calling on a story that's going to be in service to others. It will arrive in you for your pure desire and intention. In a story map, you just bullet point the whole piece. Okay, so you want to do a quick and dirty ending, but you want it to be kind of beautiful. And so let us do a story blessing. I learned this technique from Carolyn Casey. She learned it from John Donahue. He brought it out from the Kabbalah tradition. What am I doing? I'm honoring those who come before me. And I always invite you to do that, to honor the teachers that you call upon in your teachings, because it strengthens you in the line from where you come from. And so now what do you do is a story blessing. You take that metaphor, that language of spirit, and you apply it to your story and you give it away as a gift. So if you find yourself on a dark and stormy night, and you can feel the sharks of fear rumbling beneath you, and your ship has sunk. Then, if then, may the light of the moon cast her light of clarity across the ocean of your consciousness. May she light it up so that you can see and face all that is around and beneath and within. And may she offer you a path, a clear path to safety. Okay, so that's one example of blessing people. You just give people a little story blessing, and they don't even know that you didn't end your story. There you go. So that's a quick way to bring your story to closure. So for those of you who wanted to come for an introduction to the landscape of storytelling as a sacred art form, that is our class for today. And for those of you who would like to learn a little bit more about how to work with me and some classes that are coming up, I'm going to talk about that for a few more moments. So I'll bid all of you adieu who feel complete. Thank you for coming. And now I'll tell you about what is cooking in terms of if you want to continue to play. So we've got a couple of opportunities that are alive right now. And one of those classes is called Sanctuary. And this is a course, this is a 6-week class. It begins, you're welcome, it begins next Tuesday, I believe, on the 29th. And we meet on Tuesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. This is a very unusual class in the sense that I taught sacred storytelling online for many years. I've taught performance in sacred storytelling. And what I began to see is that there was this one key piece that people really needed before they got going. And it was really understanding who they were as creators. And this story, this class actually came really born out of COVID, where I was really seeing that it was time to stop just kind of going over the surface and really giving people an opportunity to go deep into understanding um, what what are the true gifts that are in you to give, and how do they come through your stories, but also what are your blocks and barriers, and also like who are you as a creator and what did you come to create in this time. So this story is all about that, and this class is actually a physical manifestation of creating a sacred place in your home as you develop relationship to yourself as a sacred storyteller. So it involves rituals, it involves practice, and it involves working with story as a transformational tool in terms of working with what you discover. What we do is we actually meet. So we meet once a week for 6 weeks. Then you also get 5 bonus classes, and these 5 bonus classes are with guest teachers. And again, this whole class is really a full embodiment of the metaphor of becoming a sacred storyteller. So our teachers help us engage those metaphors. We work with Diana, who is a scent priestess, and she works with how do you work with these ancient scents, and how does that embodiment of understanding anointing, and what is it to see yourself as a keeper of the temple and to treat yourself as divine. We also do another class with Elaine, which also works with you and on hosting your inner temple. We do a class with Alika, who is actually from the island of Maui and is an indigenous farmer there, and he talks about the concepts of gardening. And you're like, wait, it's a storytelling class, but as storytellers, we are constantly planting seeds. And so, how do you prepare the land to catch what you are putting out to grow? Okay. And then we also work with Kristen, who gives you an opportunity to create your own sacred symbol. And people love this class. I can tell you, I have been bringing guest teachers to classes for a long time, and I've never seen people so in the delight of these guest teachers. So there's 5 bonus classes that you get to take. In addition to that, you will be assigned your own team of greatness. This is your group of greatness, and this is a group of 3 or 4 people that you meet outside of class that helps you with that accountability, that helps you practice anything that we do in class. And it's people that you get to really have that intimate experience of the journey with. And what I've seen is that a lot of these people will continue to meet even after class. There's a form of connection and commitment. And the thing that I keep wondering about, and the thing that I'm really committed to, is how do we be so alive in our times? How do we keep that creative life force living through us so that we can respond in right action to the times that we are in? Be alive to the moment and be that voice of reason, be that voice of peace, be that voice of action. And what I understand is that when you engage sacred storytelling as a practice for healing for yourself and for how you live in the world, then there's some real magic and medicine that happens. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so committed to teaching this class again. I actually taught it. We were full at capacity a couple months ago, and I was only going to teach it once this year. But there was just a call to run that class again. So I was like, okay, I'll run this class again, even though it's the introductory class for this year-long program. So the year-long program has begun. And so the class that comes after this, the way that the year-long program works is that we have this one class, they're called sanctuary sections, or they're 6-week sections, where we go in and we go all the way deep in, and we get to do this full embodiment and practice of and cultivation and harvesting of what is within us and what are the stories that want to come forth. And then we have a 2 weeks off, and then we have a 4-week section where we really where we create one story. And these are story skill classes. We get to really cultivate yourself as a storyteller. We get to write your story. We get to practice it and rehearse it, and then where you get to actually tell it. So you walk out of that class with a story to tell. And that the class that comes after this sanctuary is wisdom stories. And so that will be a 4-week class. The price, I know that you're all just wondering how much this costs. The 6-week class with those 11 classes is $350. And the Wisdom Stories class is $250. And when you take them together, you get $50 off. And I know that this is times of COVID, and there's so much wonder and there's so much transition. And so for those where a payment plan would support your participation, you can always email us at info@leahlamb.com, leah@leah@leah.com, and Katie will be there and she can work out a payment plan that works out for your budget. Um, are there any questions? And then I'll tell you about one other program that's happening right now.
Was that Pacific time, 5 to 7?
Yes, that's Pacific time. Yeah. Most of my classes actually run in the morning, but this time
Yeah.
we ran this one in the evening. Any other questions? Okay. The other program that I have running right now is a program called Artemis. And Artemis is an advanced program. And this one is, oops, I'm just going to try to pull up I was going to try to pull up the link for you. Um, this program is an advanced program that's really designed for people who, it says, I'm calling all Earth Keepers. I'm calling those people who really feel called to step into that role of leadership and step into that role of facilitation and understand that story is a tool for healing transformation, both for the individual and for the collective. And so this class it's a very small group of 13 people. We meet for 13 months. And in this class, you really get to hone and really polish your skills as a storyteller, and you get to dive in deep in terms of understanding story. So we're going to do something in that class where we actually work with 4 different big stories over the season. So each season we work with a story in a very deep way and get to understand what is it to live a story, what is it to be lived by a story, what is it to truly commit yourself to understanding a story inside and out, and how it wants to live in our times. So there's an overarching sense of scholarship in it. And through those 13 months, we do 3 main projects. One is you'll have an opportunity to tell your own story. So you'll get a chance to hone your performance skills, and we will do an online performance of you either telling a mythic story or a personal story. You will decide, like, what is the story that you want to give life to in our times. We are going to do a collective assignment where, as a group, we're going to do what's called I call a story ceremony. And this is an opportunity for us to come together, and we will choose a story that wants to come alive in this time that will help with the collective healing at this time. So last time we did this was before COVID. We did it in Berkeley, California, to an audience of over 200 people. The story of Medea called to be worked on, and we did this massive forgiveness ceremony with over 200 people. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever gotten to experience. And so we're going to be sitting in how do we do this in our times on the internet. I don't know yet, but I'm excited to discover how can we. It's both a gift and a curse, right? It separates us and it brings more of us together that wouldn't normally get to come together. Strange times. So we'll be doing that, and then you'll also have an opportunity to really hone your unique voice and who and how you want to express yourself as a storyteller in the world. So you'll also have an opportunity over the course of that year to do your own personal project in your community as you see it. So that might be your online community, that might be in your home community. How do we bring people around story? You stand on a tree and tell your story from up there for social distance. We'll see. So that was a horrible example, but you know what I mean. So it's how do you bring story into your community at this time in the world. Are there any questions about Artemis, the Artemis Circle?
Can you guys hear me now? I guess it's
Yes.
working now. Oh, awesome.
Good.
Hi.
Great.
So I found this class because I was on your website this morning, and I was interested in both the Sanctuary and the Artemis. And the Artemis had said that you need to have participated in the Sanctuary first. But from the sounds of it, it's done as a collective over time. So if I were to do the Sanctuary now, I'd have to apply next year for the
No,
Artemis.
we could work it out so that you
Oh,
participate in both.
oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Perfect. Thank you.
They just
When
overlap.
when is the meeting of the? When do they meet? When do you meet with the Artemis? And how much does it cost?
So Sanctuary starts on the 29th, and that is $350. That's for a 6-week class. And then Artemis is a year-long class, and it's a different kind of course, and it's a different kind of commitment. We meet twice a month. So one day a month we work to come into big creation time. So it's a full day, one Saturday a month from I think 10 to 6. And then we also meet And so that's your time for your creation. If there's anything I've learned is that people need to create in time together. So we're really that is part of it. So you won't be sitting at a Zoom all day. We'll be working as a group, you'll be working one on one, and you'll be working solo, and you'll have the time to create in that time. And also get time to have feedback and workshop your group, and then work on it again. We meet a second time also each month to kind of integrate what's been happening. And so, in terms of the cost for Artemis, I have to look on here myself, for heaven's sakes. So the early bird special was $4,700. That equals out to be $333 a month. We are past the early bird special. Um, However, what I can do is that if someone really feels called to Artemis and you want to register um, in the next day or so, I can extend that early bird special for a couple more days. What's the email of the person who said to contact about payment plans? info@leahlam.com or katie@leahlam.com. She will see both of these.
What is it, Leah Lamb? What?
It's info@leahlam.com or Katie. Just email Katie. Here, I'll put this in here. Really just go straight to Katie and she will have you set up and going. And for people who register today, what I do is I throw in a bonus of, oops, sorry, my computer is overheating. Wait 1 second. For people who get involved today, oops, are we there? Can you hear me again?
Mm-hmm.
No? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to turn off my videos. Okay, good. What I was going to say is that for people who register today, I throw in a bonus of the library. And that library is 30 hours of extra classes of all the guest teachers who have been in my who have been a part of the school for the past 3 years. So that's everyone from Stephen Jenkinson, who I quoted, from Michael Mead to Carolyn Casey, just extraordinary teachers of our time. So that's a bonus for anyone that registers today. Okay, any other questions? Okay, the last thing I'll tell you about is the listening tour. I'm not going to say much about it. I'm gonna drop a link here, and you can go discover more of it if you'd like to. But I'm actually doing it right now. I live in Topanga, California, most of the time, pretty much all the time. And right now, I am in this process of collecting some of the old Indigenous stories of our time. But I'm also really understanding that the wisdom lives in all cultures. So as I travel across the country, I've invited people to host listening tours. And if you are on my route, I will stop in and you can bring anywhere between 3 to 8 people outside, socially distanced in a completely COVID safe environment. And I will host a little bit of what I did in terms of calling out the wisdom that lives in our groups. And we will get to sit and receive the stories that are coming alive in your community. So if you feel called to be a host or just follow along, I put the link right there. And as always, I appreciate people sharing this work with people who you think would be inspired by it. So that is our time. Any other questions or thoughts? And if not, I'll give you a quote, and we will be bid adieu today.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the listening. So this is you coming to place and you will tell stories or you will listen to stories or either or?
So for this particular tour, it's really designed. I'm doing a podcast where I'm receiving stories that are in the community. So basically, we come together, we sit in a circle. I lead us through a small facilitated experience where people get to write or create a story map, and then each person gets to tell their story. And so we will sit and listen to each other's stories. If you say, oh, but Leah, I really want you to put on a storytelling event and do an hour of storytelling while you're in town, you know, when you ask a storyteller to do such a thing, usually they say yes. So I would probably say that's what you wanted to call forth. So does that answer
Yeah,
your question?
great. Thank you.
Great. Okay. let me give you a quote. And why do we read quotes, at the beginning and end? Not only is it good style, but it's sort of like, when I bow to my Tai Chi teacher at the end of a class, I'm not just bowing to him. I'm bowing to all those who've come before him, and his teachers and his teachers' teachers. So that's what we're doing as we read these great words from those who've come before us. And this comes from Stephen Jenkinson. Act as if you are people of consequence, so that I can treat you as such. And you matter. What must have happened to people who unconsciously agreed that the best presence in this world is to have no consequence in this world? It's a velvet gauntlet, this idea of being of consequence. It doesn't clink when it hits the ground, but you can feel it. It would be proper to proceed that there is consequence to us being here.
Mm.
So may your stories be of consequence as you are. You know the power of your language. And you have a lovely day. I'll take you all off mute and we could say adieu.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Leah. Bless you.
There.
Thank you for your time and your wisdom. It was nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you for all your good energy.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. I'm talking to you from a very long distance. My daughter lives in California and she told me about you. She
Oh,
said, you will love Leah Lamb. You have to go do something. I live in Israel.
oh wow.
And yeah, so when you were asking about our story, I also feel in ways I'm connected with people in the world as I've never been before. And at the same time, I feel the chaos all around. So there's this coming together and there's this falling apart. It's like, it's a very strange time.
Mhm.
But I enjoyed it. And I was very happy when you said that it was Pacific time because that's doable. When I thought it was Eastern time, it would not have been doable. So I will definitely think about it.
Wonderful,
Okay.
wonderful, wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Here.